Greetings, Duelist, and welcome to another video. So, when Duelist Nexus first got released, the Tistina archetype was one thing that I gazed my eyes upon. It was the newest TCG exclusive archetype, and Konami gave it a couple of cards, and they gave the deck an identity that at first glance was very unknown. But right now, looking at it like 2 weeks later, I kind of changed my perspective on it a little bit, and I kind of arrived at the conclusion that of what Konami wants us to do with these cards. Basically, um, what Konami kind of wants you to do is use the Tistina cards as a board breaking approach against your opponent's already established boards. Um, but we still have a couple of issues. The first issue that we have was, could this be played as its own like archetype engine with the cards that were already given available at the card pool? The second question and problem that we need to solve is it efficient at what it's trying to do? And if you remember, when I talked about Gold Pride, for those who have seen it, for those who have not, I suggest you go look at it. One thing that I did with Gold Pride was I tried to test the deck before the next wave of release of support, with a lot of non-engine or a lot of splashable cards that just incorporated synergy with what you wanted to do with the strategy. And that's pretty much what I'm trying to do today. I was trying to look around what other strategies do we have in the game that can highly benefit from what you're trying to do with Tistina. And the one that piqued my interest the most was Gem Knight. So the main reason for Gem Knight is that the last wave of support that Konami gave them are cards that are also efficient if your opponent has an established board. Gem Knight Quartz, Scatter Fusion, and Lady Brilliant Rose, Lady Rose Diamond, all are cards that are more efficient if your opponent has already an established board than if they do not. And that's kind of have been the territory with Gem Knights. Like in the past, people have played this as an FTK strategy, but it's very clear that Konami's intention in mind was to make Gem Knights a strategy for when you go second. And that's where Tistina comes in. I found a little bit of synergy between both archetypes and a way to linchpin both decks, and the card that makes it possible is Gem Knight Amethyst. Gem Knight Amethyst is a Gem Knight monster that requires an aqua, meaning that you can use all your Tistina monsters for it. But your Tistina gods are also light attribute monsters, so you can fuse with them to make Seraphinite. And those are two good Gem Knight monsters that you can summon off Scatter Fusion, as well as with just Gem Knight Fusion. And the thing about it is, under an established board in a simplified game state, Gem Knights can really break apart almost any board in the game. Granted that your opponent doesn't have like enough interactions for you. The Tistina cards are good because if your opponent's interactions are heavy enough to stop your Gem Knight cards, you can use your Tistina cards to just pick apart the rest of their board, or you can sequence it backwards and just use the Tistina cards to try to pick apart the opponent's board and then proceed with the Gem Knight cards. But then we have another issue, and the other issue is, what do you do if your opponent does not really like establishes a board enough for you to dedicate you're going second strategy. I'm still figuring that part out, because the first approach I tried was with hand traps. Ghost Ogre and Nibiru are and Gamma specifically. The reason for those three is because they're light attribute monsters, so you can make Seraphinite with them. But the another reason for them specifically is because they are cards that remove cards from your opponent, and removal hand traps are really strong in this format. Like right now, the Ghost Ogre is not being played enough as it should be warranted. If you look at like the decks in the game that are kinda like establishing boards and kind of fall to this card, we're looking at Kashtira, we're looking at Purely, we're looking at Dragon Link, just to name like a few outliers. It's also decent against Rescue Ace, and that deck is starting to slowly pick apart in popularity. It's not good against Unchained. However, against the Hiking Caesar, you can use this against them, so it's not like the end of the world. Against the Infernoble Knight archetype, this card is really, really strong. Sometimes it could even end the turn. So that's why I chose this approach. However, one issue that I've been finding is, one, people who main triple tactic talents, and this card is way more popular than it was before, because people are like dedicating spots to hand traps. If you know me and you know how I build decks, you already know that I am not a fan of playing hand traps in the main, just because I respect this card way too much. Another issue is like sometimes when you're hand trapping your opponent, you need to know like a perfect balance between their choke points to their like strong established boards, or like if they can dedicate enough to what you're trying to do. Because if your opponent does not dedicate enough to the board, you probably won't win, because the Tistina cards are only workable if your opponent has like a strong enough board. However, the Gem Knight cards are strong if they don't have a strong board, and like having a combination of these can be awkward if your opponent did not play enough for you to use them to maximize the value of both of these. So I tried a different approach. The different approach that I tried was playing Kaijus. I am mainly Droll and Lockbird. I think Droll and Lockbird is like the best hand trap right now. Another card I was testing was Forbidden Droplet. It's kind of up in the air, but the point of the Kaijus are that you try to pick apart your opponent's board with another engine, and if your opponent has like very, very problematic monsters that you just cannot out, or they just outright win the game against you, like Baguska for example, you can just Kaiju over them, over those cards, and like pick apart their board that way. So that's like one approach that I thought about. Another approach that I think is decent is like Black Garden. I feel like moving forward, if you're playing a deck exactly like this one, this card could be very, very ideal. I'm still testing it out. In the past, Black Garden has been an enabler for a lot of the general strategies, as well as like FTKs, and Gem Knight is one that can do this very, very efficiently. However, you need to find a good level of consistency. With Tistinas, Black Garden is kind of interesting because it gives your opponent more monsters. And if you end up giving them enough monsters, then that will make your Divine Domain very effective. And it doesn't matter how many tokens your opponent gets if you end up summoning Crystal God Tistina, because it means that you can just eliminate all of them and just have an established board with your Tistina cards, while your opponent has to worry about like stuff like Black Garden. So that's how that has been the theory so far. I don't have too many duels with it. However, there is one duel I kind of want to showcase. This duel will be a perfect example of how both the Gem Knights and the Tistina cards work. In one duel, you're going to see interaction involving the Gem Knight cards, like standing alone by themselves. And then in another duel, you will see how the Tistina cards come into play. But yeah, I just chose tier elements. I have faced a numerous amount of different decks. However, I just wanted to showcase this one because this one's the perfect example of what I'm trying to do with this deck. Like here I'm summoning my Gem Knight cards. My opponent has Mudora engraved, so I'm just kind of waiting on him to see if he interacts with it, because that is a card that can be problematic for your setup. But however, my opponent is letting it almost everything go through, and that's just going to apply a lot of pressure onto your opponent. Like right here, this is an example that I'm talking about. Like Gem Knight Fusion can recur itself from grave as many times as you can, as long as you keep banishing cards. So like this card already applies pressure to your opponent. Prismara can pick apart boards, just discarding the Gem Knight Fusion. The Lady Rose Diamond can also like pick apart the opponent's board if they try to just play into it. Right now, here I'm trying to do Gem Knight Fusion. He now decides to do the Mudora, and since he's activating Mudora, I'm activating the Lady Rose, and that's how I win the game. That's the first duel. Now the second duel. My opponent is not establishing a board at all. The main reason he's not like dedicating to the board is because he knows that what I'm trying to do with this deck. So it kind of goes into the part of him just trying to like not play into it while trying to OTK. I think the biggest mistake he made was not summoning the Kashtira tier element. Like if he would have done that, he might have won the duel. But now I'm summoning the Crystal God and trying to do the effect. He grabs us. I'm playing Thrust. Thrust I think is pivotal in a deck like this one. But yeah, like he's dedicating he didn't get the kill shot because I had the droplets. Now I'm going to slowly pick apart his board. I think one card that I considered was Dark Ruler no more. I think the number one reason I didn't play Dark Ruler was because I didn't know like how important it would be to OTK with the Gem Knight cards instead of just like picking apart their board. So that's one thing I'm figuring out. Another issue is what happens if they make you go first. Right now, what I'm trying out is IP into Tryhard or Goddess. Like Tryhard is a monster that's really hard to out, and like it pretty much buys you a turn if your opponent is not ready for it. So that's like one example of something you can do. Um, the other approach is Black Garden. One other approach that I thought about was Naturia Beast, Naturia Beast and Barkyon with the Adamancipator cards, like Lady Researcher and like stuff like that. Um, I'm still figuring it out, but I just wanted to share this concept. When it comes to new archetypes, I always try to my best to explore them as much as possible because you never know what might end up being found. And another really important part about this is that testing with new archetypes kind of gives you a grasp of what you think the deck can needs, and it kind of circumvents your expectations whether or not Konami can give you something proper for them. Right now, I think that Gold Pride is pretty much solved. The deck is not amazing by any means, but the deck has seen national tops and has seen like regional and YCS tops already. So it kind of shows you that the deck and the strategy is cohesive and it has an identity. It's very soon to tell what happens to Tistina, but for now I can say that um, in order for them to thrive, they have a lot of competition because Age of Overlord is a very game-changing set. I think even without the new Tistina cards, that set is going to like drastically change the game, and a lot of strategies are going to be popular. And in order for Konami to make this archetype playable, they need to give it cards that not only solidifies like the identity of the deck, but helps counter what we have already established and what's going to be popular in the format sooner or later. But yeah, that's it from me. I hope you found this informative. Keep practicing and keep dueling.